Do you want to know what my happy thought would be? My happy thought would be that Disney stops remaking their own classics and effectively ruining them, and instead comes up with some new ideas to inspire a new generation. But I know, I'm asking too much. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
Come on. Do it. Do it!
Peter and Wendy is a modern reimagining or remake of Disney's 1953 animated classic. In the live-action updated version, we follow Wendy Darling, a young girl looking to avoid boarding school, who meets Peter Pan, a boy who refuses to grow up. Wendy, her brothers, and Tinkerbell travel with Peter to the magical world of Neverland, where they encounter the evil Captain Hook. Now, this may come as a surprise to some of you who know that I despise everything that modern-day Disney stands for. But truthfully, I grew up like a lot of people my age, watching the animated Disney classics. And one of my favorites as a kid just so happened to be Peter Pan. Now, there's been about 1,000 different interpretations of the Peter Pan story at this point. So much so that this movie, to me, doesn't need to exist on two levels. One being that we've had enough Peter Pan adaptations in general, and two, the Disney animated classic is so iconic that it would be difficult for anyone to follow that up with a remake that is worthwhile.
Good luck. You're gonna need it.
To me, a good remake takes the core idea of the story and puts a fresh spin on it. And maybe even injects some new ideas into the story just to differentiate it from all the other versions. And to Disney and director David Lowery's credit, they did at least try to do that, both from a story and visual perspective. The issue is that a lot of the changes that they made simply do not work.
No, don't like that.
And make no mistake about it, there are quite a few significant changes from the original animated film. Apparently there was also some attempts to use some material from the original book as well, but when it comes right down to it, we all know that this movie will be compared to that animated film. Every one of these live-action remakes that Disney has done has been billed as just that, a remake.
So, whatever it is that you're offering, we're not into it. Don't care. Couldn't care less.
I think one of the biggest changes right off the bat is a greater emphasis on Wendy in this story, which I guess should have came to the surprise of no one given the title of this movie. Wendy's damsel in distress and fawning over Peter moments have been completely removed from this movie to the surprise of no one. Instead, she's much more proactive, especially in fight scenes, which in the scheme of things doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. They even go out of their way to have her save Peter Pan on more than one occasion. She does belittle him a little bit early on in the film, and she even bitch slaps him at one point. Damn! Unfortunately, I feel like the writers of this film felt like they needed to up Wendy's contributions to the story. Presumably because they didn't feel like her motherly role to the Lost Boys was enough. But truthfully, if you take your 2023 mentality out of it, her role is already very important to this story and should have been enough for her character, without them trying to shoehorn in this idea of her being more independent. Yes, Queen! The motherly stuff is there, but it does feel a bit more downplayed in this version. The other major change in this movie is to Captain Hook. If I'm being honest, I think Jude Law in a different movie could have been a great Captain Hook. But honestly, his version of the character in this film came off as very forgettable. Disney committed the cardinal sin once again when they believe that one of their villains is quote-unquote one-dimensional. And they tried to make Captain Hook somewhat sympathetic. And we all know this has become kind of a tired trend in modern movies.
Stop it!
In reality, we don't always need to feel something for a villain. And we also don't need you to over-explain his backstory to us. Which they also do in this film, by the way. There is a very clear explanation given as to why Captain Hook hates Peter Pan so much. And it just didn't work, because if history told us anything, we don't really need to know that in order for us to understand who Captain Hook is as a character. Sometimes just a charismatic performance by a great actor is enough to make a villain memorable.
Because it's all part of the plan.
I mean, we didn't need to know everything about Hans Gruber to make him interesting, did we? And if you want to keep it in the Peter Pan realm, Dustin Hoffman's Hook from Hook is infinitely more memorable than this one. Jude Law's talents do feel underutilized, and thus his version of the character feels very dull and forgettable. If you're wondering why I haven't mentioned Peter Pan much in this review, it's because he kind of feels like an afterthought in his own movie. He doesn't come off in this movie like a figure of legend like he does in all of the other adaptations. The kid actor playing him through no fault of his own is severely miscast. And even though Peter always came off as kind of cocky and full of himself in most of these adaptations, in this film it feels like they went out of their way to make him straight up unlikable.
I knew it, I'm surrounded by assholes.
Which is again pretty strange because he is supposed to be the hero of this story. It's an instance where they show him as a flawed character, which normally would be fine. But there's a difference between having your hero have flaws and just portraying him as being kind of a dick. And again, it feels like they kind of downplay a lot of his heroism. The other major issue I had with the movie is how it looked visually. Most of the film has this weird, dull green tint to it, which makes the entire film feel much more dull than it should.
Put some effort into it!
Now, if this was a creative choice to make our world and Neverland different from each other, that may have been a bit more interesting and forgivable. But Neverland looked just as dull and boring visually as our world did. It feels like a lot of the magic and fairy tale aspects have been removed from Neverland in this film. What should be a bright and colorful world of imagination is portrayed in this film like we are on the plains of Scotland about to go into battle with our kilts on.
But they'll never take our freedom!
It just didn't look or feel like Neverland in the slightest to me. As for other changes, Tinkerbell in this movie isn't so bitter and resentful towards Wendy. Perhaps again by showing her being jealous over the attention that Peter is giving Wendy. That really doesn't fit in with 2023 ideologies and they felt the need to change it. But even so, they made Tinkerbell feel kind of directionless in this film. The Lost Boys are much more inclusive as it pertains to members of the opposite sex. In fact, it's actually mentioned in the movie in a line of dialogue how the name doesn't really need to make sense, which is a bit contradictory to why the change was reportedly being made anyway. Apparently, it was done to make all children be able to see themselves in the Lost Boys. But in reality, kids really don't care about those things anyway. This is just another example of adults injecting their own insecurities into a kid's film.
S-O-F capital T, soft, huh?
And honestly, it doesn't impact the story one way or another, and it feels like it's just being done for those cultural brownie points we always talk about. The last thing I wanted to mention was the character of Tiger Lily, the indigenous princess whose inclusion in the original 1953 film has resulted in some people calling that film problematic. If I remember correctly, the Native American segment of that film has been removed completely on the Disney Plus version. And yet another reason why you should buy physical media and not rely on streaming. It has been said that that scene enhances harmful stereotypes of indigenous people.
Bullshit.
And again, I feel like this is just people in 2023 with too much time on their hands and overthinking things that they are desperately trying to be angry about. Unsurprisingly, a lot of the Native American stuff has been removed from this film as well. But Tiger Lily is included, albeit in a more authentic portrayal of Native culture. But again, it really doesn't impact the story all that much and feels more like an attention grab than anything. At this point, I was just slightly impressed that they included the character at all, since more often than not, it seems like they are trying to erase Native American imagery from pop culture.
Me, right?
Overall, I have to say, at this point, the modern reimagining trend is well past its expiration date. So far, all that these Disney remakes have really done is taken away everything that's magical and special about those original Disney classics, and replaced them with dull, lifeless versions of those stories that I can't really imagine anyone would find entertaining, let alone children. The new thing is to reintroduce these stories to new generations. Well, I'm here to say that the originals still exist, and I'm more likely to show my son the 1953 classic before I subject him to this snooze fest. Peter Pan and Wendy is pretty much what I've come to expect from these Disney remakes, and that's why I'm going to give it the Angry Rocky.
That's right, it stinks!
Y'all be cool. Right on.